This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your specific situation. All opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The hosts and producers assume no liability for actions taken based on the content of this podcast.
Welcome to Healthia, the show where we make health feel a little less intimidating and a whole lot more fun. I'm Cheyenne, your co-host and resident comedic relief, here to keep things light. Hosting and leading the charge is Dr. David Pei, our medical mastermind, who asks all the right questions. Beside us is Eva, co-host and producer, making sure the magic happens behind the scenes and on the mic. And of course, we've got John, the brains behind the operation and our co-producer, keeping us on track. Together, we're here to bring you real conversation, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs along the way. So buckle up, because when it comes to your health, the answer should always be health, yeah. All right, Dr. David Pei, what is on your mind today?
Well, Cheyenne, what's on my mind today is stress, antibiotics, colonoscopies, and the garden in your gut. We're going to talk about the gut microbiome. So first of all, we're going to ask ourselves, what is it? Why does it matter? And what damages it? And when it does get damaged, how do we help it recover?
So why do you think that's so important? What's so important about our gut health to the rest of our health?
Well, the gut health, we're just now discovering all these new insights and details about gut health and how gut health is tied to the gut microbiome, because it affects pretty much all the rest of your body systems. It affects your brain in terms of cognition and emotional health, and it affects most of your neurotransmitters in the body outside the brain are released and impact your gut, and then your gut impacts everything else. Think of your gut like a rainforest, and that you need a healthy rainforest for the rest of the environment out there to be healthy. So we're going to, again, go into more details about the body systems that it does affect. And ultimately, I think this is going to be one of the more important topics that we discuss on Health Yeah, because there's not a lot of awareness about it. And we're going to hopefully provide the audience increased awareness and concrete steps that you can start today to improve the health of your microbiome, which is going to have great results and yield for overall health. More than I would say it's one of the top 5 most important things for your overall health.
So what you're saying is gut health is basically microbiome of the gut. So the bacteria in the gut. What is the role of that in your digestion of your food and your immunity? And what are common signs of poor gut health?
Like you said, when they say biome, microbe means small, as most people know. Biome means environment. So we're talking about, these are bacteria we're talking about. And it's a collection of trillions of them. I think they said there are more bacteria in your gut than there are stars in the Milky Way. So there's a lot. Yes, it's a huge number of, and these guys are very important. Yes, so think of it kind of like your internal ecosystem of sorts in your gut. And your gut is very important. Think of your gut like a rainforest. If you look at a rainforest, it's lush. It's got multiple different types of plants and animals in it, species that interact with each other, hopefully in a good way that creates a healthy ecosystem, versus one that's run down. Like, I think in your mind, think about like a toxic waste site, and how awful that is. There isn't diversity. There might be some animals that live there, maybe like things like rats and stuff, or just weeds growing out through, concrete. Think about that as opposed to a lush rainforest where things are in balance with each other. And when you have a low diversity,
yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So most of these microbes that we're going to talk about today live in your gut or your colon, and that relationship between those bacteria and your colon cells is going to have that impact for the rest of your body. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. And you mentioned, why is it important? One of the things is these bacteria, to keep them healthy, they need to get the right kind of food. It's different from the kind of foods that we eat and that we absorb. They have their own sort of needs for them to be healthy and maintain a good population with the kind of diversity of bacteria that you need. It's not just one kind. This is going to get a little technical, but when the bacteria do well, they produce something called short chain fatty acids. So, short means small, right? Obviously, or not long. And fatty acids are just a collection of energy sources. That is very important for the colon cells. And when they get that as their food, so when the bacteria get the food they need, they produce short chain fatty acids, which is the food that the colon needs. And everyone's talking about colon health these days. You hear about terms like leaky gut or uh, um, irritable bowel syndrome, things like that. So, the gut is a very complicated organ. There's an entire specialty dedicated to it called gastroenterology, and they're experts in disorders of your digestive system. And the gut is just such a complex thing, and there's research going on about it all the time. So,
Well, tell us.
that's why it's important.
Okay. I agree. And, we've seen incredible rises in the past few years of colon cancer in young people. I wonder if it's related. And so tell us I'm interested in some common signs that might indicate to you that your gut is in poor shape.
Some of the more common ones, again, under the umbrella of gut problems or irritable bowel syndrome, people might have problems with food intolerances, with bloating, or issues with constipation or diarrhea, fatigue, brain fog, even pain. Those are some common things that people deal with, especially the food intolerances. You'll see people that say, I can't eat this or I can't eat that. And you're wondering, why are all these problems? You would think that eating foods and digesting it well and getting the energy and nutrients we need out of it should be a very easy and natural thing. Why are we having all these issues, especially these days, of all these kind of symptoms? And I find this very common among my friends and my family complain to me about, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, or I have brain fog. And I think that a lot of this is tied to whether or not you have a healthy gut. And to have a healthy gut, you need to have a healthy microbiome.
Okay. That's interesting. What about, I've also heard that anxiety and depression can be related to poor gut health. Is that true? Or you think that's true?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I think there is what is called a gut-brain axis. Have you ever heard of that? That just basically means your gut and your brain and your mind there's a connection there. These gut bacteria, they influence and impact the neurotransmitters. The gut is like a brain of your own within your body, outside the brain. So things like, you may have heard of these neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, which impact mood, GABA, which impacts a sense of calmness, and dopamine, which impacts motivation. The balance of that is affected by whether or not your gut bacteria are healthy. So we never think about that. You think, well, that's in my gut. Why would that affect my brain and my mind? But there's an interplay, again, called the gut-brain axis. The two are, your brain, mind, and your gut and your belly are connected to each other. And that's where the importance of the microbiome comes in. So in real life, if you have a healthy microbiome, that means you're going to more likely have a healthy gut. So what does that look like on the emotional side? Less anxiety, better stress tolerance, clearer thinking. And I'm going to share with the audience my own. I've dedicated myself to having a healthier microbiome in the last 2 months. And I can tell you, it didn't kick in right away. It took about 2.5, 3 weeks of some interventions we're going to talk about involving things like resistant starches and whatnot. But I think with better clarity, I'm calmer. I feel just a brighter outlook on life. And the hard thing about trying to approach this is it's not like you're going to feel it in the first 6 hours after taking a pill. It's a journey. It's like I said, we keep on talking about growing a forest. And I like that metaphor of a healthy rainforest versus a toxic place where all these chemicals were dumped. And you look at those, and even first cursory glance, you can see the difference when things which were toxic or poisonous were put into the environment, and things cannot grow like they should, versus a natural, lush place where you see just life thrive. I think that when I think about that happening on the gut level for me, that helps me visualize.
Yeah, it helps me visualize too. And I think there's also an incredible increase of anxiety and depression in today's society that people talk about all the time. I wonder if it's partially due to this.
I think that's, yeah.
Also very interesting. Just yesterday, I read an article about how colorectal cancer is the #1 cause of death among cancers in patients under the age of 50. It's now the number one cause. And we see it day in and day out at work when we're doing colonoscopies. We're finding more and more cancers in younger and younger people. And I always ask the gastroenterologist doing the procedure, like, what do you think it is? And everybody has a different type of answer. Nobody really has a proper answer for us. And so I definitely feel like we need to work on our gut microbiome and optimize that lush rainforest that you're talking about, that ecosystem, David. But we're definitely doing something wrong in society today. I don't know what it is, but we definitely need to make a difference.
So I have a question. I would say the average American diet and stress that we live under and all that, how does that affect your microbiome?
Yeah, they need good food. I just mentioned the earlier thing about what short chain fatty acids are. That's important. I'm going to go back to that, but let me answer Eva's question. Processed foods have a negative impact on the microbiome. So does alcohol. Those things are things that damage or set back having a healthy microbiome. Now, I'm not saying that you can eat zero processed foods or you can't have alcohol, but those are some considerations. And there's other things too, like when you take antibiotics, for instance, that kills off large part, or it's like, think of like, it's clear cut a large portion of that rainforest. It kills off bacteria. You're going to have impact. When you take a prep for a colonoscopy, that impacts the microbiome as well. So we're talking about stress, alcohol, antibiotics, processed food, colonoscopy prep. And again, I'm not saying, don't get colonoscopy, but I think that it would help people if they realize these things, which are a part that we most people are going to have. Almost all of us are going to have stress, and people like to enjoy a glass of wine with their friends. So I'm not saying don't do those, but keep those things in mind. Unfortunately, as you know, we always talk about this unhealthy food environment. It's hard to make good choices food-wise that are going to help you keep your microbiome healthy. I'm going to go back also to what Cheyenne just said. There was this article, and we know it. I mean, we see it in public. I think one of the more prominent public instances of colon cancer in a young person is Chadwick Boseman, and he was just fit the hero in the movie Black Panther, and colon cancer cut him down at an early age. So where does the microbiome tie into this? And it's multifactorial. I don't think people are going to find a silver bullet saying, oh yeah, this one thing here is why you see an increase in colon cancer deaths among young people. It's the number one cancer of young people now. Why is that happening? So I mentioned earlier, we have to feed the microbiome to keep it healthy. And we'll go over what kind of things we can do for that. And in turn, the microbiome produces, I said, short chain fatty acids, right? So it's a very symbiotic relationship between the microbiome and the gut. And what is symbiotic? Think of, like, for those of you who've seen like the movie Finding Nemo. Do you remember, like, clownfish have a symbiotic relationship with the anemone, right? And if you look at the rainforest, when I say ecosystem, things are connected to each other, ideally, right? Just in terms of philosophies, I think that's collaboration. What am I always saying about our team? Collaboration in
Yes.
sentence, right? That happens on the cellular bacteria level. What do I mean?
They're friends.
Well, when the human, yes, that's all life, by the way. That's a life philosophy, but it happens on the gut, literally cellular level. So when these bacteria are happy and they make short chain fatty acids, and there's a prominent one called, they're friends, butyrate. So the happy microbiome makes short chain fatty acids. One of those is called butyrate. Butyrate is the preferred food of the colon cells. It feeds the colon cells. It makes them calm down. It reduces inflammation. It makes them tight and strengthens them as a barrier to the bad stuff we don't want going from our colon into our bodies. So if you ever hear of the term leaky gut, again, it's oversimplifying it, but I think we don't need to go too deep into it. It means basically we're like, when I was taking my embryology class in medical school, they said, you're basically a tube from mouth to butthole, right? A tube with eyes, nose, and arms and legs. Okay, well, think of your tube, mouth to butthole, right? And I mean, we're going to make it fun, right? So, but that sort of the bottom half of that tube, that's very important. So those cells that make up the tube, they like to eat butyrate. If you make them use your typical sugar for fuel, they burn out because that was not the fuel that they were intended to eat. If that makes sense, right? They can run on glucose, but it's like, I wondered if I take my internal combustion engine car that was not meant to use diesel and pump diesel into it, it would probably go. I don't know if that's true or not, by the way. Any mechanics out there, you can
It would
tell me.
eventually.
But
Yeah.
that was not what my car was designed to run on, right? Or if I have a turbo car, it needs the higher level octane, right? So these are human-made machines, but there is a purpose for what kind of fuel they'll need to run optimally and run healthy in the long run. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's think about our gut cells. What do they want to eat? They want to eat the butyrate, a short chain fatty acid. Where does that butyrate come from? Your microbiome. So again, this is this collaborative effort between the microbiome and your gut. So some people think, and it's been shown, I think, in studies that when the colon cells don't get butyrate, they get dysregulated. They're not happy about it. And that's one of those high, fast turnover cells. That makes sense, right?
Yes.
Think about, why don't people worry about small intestine cancer, right? There's some organs that just don't get cancer much, if
Right.
at all, right? It's colon cells turn over very rapidly. What does that mean? So, colon cells, they're out there, and then when they become not useful, they shut off, and you got to have the next replacement coming in. So there's fast turnover. They need to have good fuel. And if they don't get the butyrate that they want and have to rely upon non-ideal fuel sources like glucose too long, they get dysregulated. It increases the chance that their internal machinery is not going to work as well.
I see.
And that could cause damage to the process, to where they're more likely to become what we call dysplastic.
Yes.
Dysplasia. Or when you see, like, it's not quite cancer yet, but you see a mound of something called a polyp in the colon, right? That is more likely to happen. And I think, again, that this is probably one of the biggest reasons or potential culprits of why there's more gut problems, and that those gut problems include colon cancer and other things like inflammatory bowel disease, and that would be things like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis.
Very interesting.
Well, so if we don't have a healthy gut, what do we need to be eating to make our gut more healthy? Because I would think, like you said, everybody's going to have some wine, everybody's going to have some processed food. But if you had a healthy rainforest to start with, then that wouldn't make much of an impact.
Yes. So good. Very good. First of all, what does the microbiome like to eat, right? And then you'll see that a lot of this stuff is naturally in natural food. So fiber-rich foods, just broad-based categories would be things like vegetables, beans and lentils, oats, berries. I think, Eva, you particularly have picked up and discovered milling your own wheat and having a fiber-rich bread that goes through a natural fermentation process, right? So
Yeah,
things
and
like that.
I actually have something to say about that, because that's been a game changer for my gut health.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. So, those are the kind of things. And if you would particularly want to hone in on things that are really dedicated to feeding those important little guys in your gut. And again, there's more of them in your gut than there are stars in the Milky Way. Keep that in mind. Giving them things that have a carbohydrate source that we can't digest. So it ends up in the gut undigested. So things like cooked and cooled potatoes. There's something about potatoes and rice that when you cool them, a certain proportion of them cannot be digested by you, which means that carbohydrate can't become a part of the sugar in your own blood, but rather it stays in the gut and lets those guys, eat and produce those short chain fatty acids. Green bananas, and there's some supplements too that I take something called Biome, bio.me. I got this at Whole Foods, and also on Amazon. It's pretty widely available, and it's a daily prebiotic fiber. That's different than a probiotic, and that can be confusing. They sound very similar. Well, what's the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic? A prebiotic is food for the microbiome. Think of it that way. A probiotic actually is live bacteria species that help seed the microbiome, if that makes sense. I want to add a little bit of detail here just to make sure people don't get confused. Those probiotics those species are not the majority of your microbiome. Keep that in mind, okay? They're like little friends. And if you look at when they do try to culture out the microbiome, and microbiome studies are very difficult from what I understand, but they're friends. And when you introduce them, they help reseed and get those bacteria that are beneficial restarted. So again, prebiotic, food for the microbiome, probiotic, they're bacteria species that can help seed and help assist their friends in the microbiome, healthy jungle forest, get on their way, especially after an event like we talked about, like stress or antibiotics and things like that.
So I think it's like seeds and fertilizer, just to dumb it down a
Yes.
little bit. Okay. Because I'm
Yes,
from
no,
Alabama.
that's good. That's good.
From
That's
Alabama, so
fertilizer. So that supplement I take is fertilizer.
exactly.
Right? Yeah, right.
All right.
A probiotic is our seeds.
Yeah. For me, the fresh milled flour is really interesting, and I've studied about it quite a bit, and it has tremendously helped my personal gut. But it has intact prebiotic fibers in it because it has the bran and the germ, which is in any commercially available bread that is taken away. So you don't get the prebiotic fibers, even if it's whole wheat bread, even if it's anything. If it's the oils, all of that stuff gets rancid, and it doesn't turn into butyrate like fresh milled flour does. And it actually feeds the
Absolutely.
colon. So
And
it's
that's
a game
great. I'm
changer
so
for me.
that's awesome. And I want to kind of highlight to the audience. So see, one of the four of us, I don't do well with bread because just with flour in general, I don't tolerate it. And my history of metabolic issues in my own past and my family's history, Eva tolerates that really well, and it's done wonders for her. And that's why I use the prebiotic fiber that has very little glycemic impact. And you see the two different approaches we had to still try to give our good guys fertilizer, like you said, Eva.
Yeah.
And there's also, in the fertilizer, there's also natural seeds. I forgot to mention this earlier. So we mentioned, if you want to drill down, like cooled potatoes after you cook them, green bananas, cooled rice, or supplements like I take. There's also the fermented foods, which are probiotics. And you'll hear this mentioned, like if you have good yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, those fermented foods, right? They have those little helpers that help seed your microbiome. And of course, there's supplements out there that are also probiotics that try to do that on a more, specific level. So that's just a great story, and to see how you don't have to approach it one way or the other. If you don't tolerate bread, even the great kind as well, and I'll still eat that. I actually enjoy that, but I just can't have it as much as some other people can.
Well, I don't know that very many people have had fresh milled flour. Even sourdough is not fresh milled. I mean, like you take the wheat berries and you grind it and you make your bread. So there's absolutely no nutrient value that's lost. And all bread is not created equal. Some breads are better than others. It's about fermentation and about what's in it and all of that kind of stuff. But I think sourdough bread is better than regular bread because it's had a longer fermentation process, and that leads to a little more something that can end up feeding the colon and the short chain fatty acids. But even sourdough bread is not as good as fresh milled flour. But, I think we need to eat real food. I think real food feeds our gut versus processed food. We're all going to do that in a little different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
Eva. I mean, I think about that bread that you make. It does involve a lot of steps. That's Cadillac level bread you're eating.
that's right.
And that's not even the same food. I mean, they go under the category of bread, but you pick up that soft stuff at your grocery store that costs, that's cheap and mass produced, that lasts forever on your shelf. That's just a different beast than what you're eating. And that's why there's such a huge difference in the nutritional value and what it could. I would say there's a good chance that the stuff that you get off the store shelves probably had things sprayed on it, like what's called glyphosate or Roundup. That's kind of a controversial thing, but a lot of people think that impacts your microbiome in a very negative way. That's just one example of how processed foods undermines your microbiome.
I think that I think that it may have been sprayed with glyphosate, but at the very least, it doesn't have the nutrient value. That's why they strip it all away and then they go back and enrich it, in quotes. But it's not the same. It's like buying something that's apple flavored versus eating an apple. It's not the same.
Mm. Yes, because when you eat the bread you make, Eva, your microbiome gets food.
Correct.
When you eat, if they still have this Wonder Bread or sunflower,
Yeah.
I forgot the
Sunbeam.
brand names, but you know what I'm talking
Sunbeam.
about.
Yeah.
Sunbeam,
I grew
yeah.
up on it.
Yeah, your microbiome is not getting fed when you eat that.
No, and when you eat Pop-Tarts, it's not either.
Right.
And so the thing is that it's hard, especially I think in today's culture, to eat real food all the time. If we can't do that, we do the best we can. We're not about being perfect, as Cheyenne says. So are there supplements? Like what supplements do different people take to help their microbiome be better?
Okay, well, yeah. So I can share what I take. So again, let's two broad categories: probiotics and prebiotics. Probiotics, again, are the seeds. They have bacteria in them that are supposed to help. And natural food examples we talked about already: yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, things like that. But there are supplements out there that contain specific bacteria species that are supposed to help you. So that's one. I don't have one that I can recommend. I actually don't take a probiotic myself at this point right now. Being of Korean background, I do eat a fair amount of kimchi, and it's not just any kimchi. It's got to be the kind that's been fermented and have the bacteria that are alive in it, right? So that's one thing. There are prebiotics. And again, we mentioned the natural versions of what those could be: green bananas, cooked and cooled potatoes or rice, things like that. The supplement I take that is also a prebiotic. So what's in this stuff, this Biome? It has resistant starch. What does resistant starch mean? It resists being digested and going into your body. It stays there so our good friends, the microbiome, can eat that and produce those beneficial things like the short chain fatty acids like butyrate. So those are the main categories. I'm not going to go into details because I think that I want the audience to really think about, there's Eva's journey, and you went through all these different things. And I think you found good resources that led you into that place for you to start eating your own milled wheat, sourdough, fermentation bread. I went through a journey too where I looked at different things. I eat kimchi. I thought, let me try this resistant starch, this Biome product. And so that's how and I think the audience are going to, because there's pitfalls. I won't go into too much detail, but you're going to have to see what works best for you. I'm in a good place right now with this. I may look into probiotics at some point, but again, I think that eating kimchi helps me, but also keep in mind this: you want a diversity of species, right? I'm sure even I have different microbiome profiles based upon the food we're feeding them, right? And if you want to take it to the next level, you may want to look into diversifying the food that your microbiome eats, right? And
well, I can tell you that I'm from Alabama. We ain't going to eat no kimchi, but we will eat sauerkraut.
Yes. Well, Dana mentioned sauerkraut juice for the little ones to help seed their microbiome.
I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd have known that when my children were little.
So David, would you recommend, so you would prefer getting probiotics from foods rather than taking it in the form of a supplement, or what are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's going to lead me into my next segue. And I didn't go over all the benefits or what the microbiome does too. I'm going to go back to that. But while I had this on my mind, I think that remember I mentioned there's certain things that can really clear the forest, and you want to regrow that forest. What are they? Well, heavy alcohol binges, which no one should do. But if you do that, or heavy emotional stress loads where you're going through a lot, there's just a period that you're just taking on a lot. Having an infection and having to take a course of antibiotics, doing your colonoscopy screening, right? Those things impact your microbiome, and they cleared some of that forest, right? You got to grow it back. That's where I think maybe probiotic and prebiotic supplementation can really be beneficial. I think most people can get away without it, but for me, again, it's hard for me to get enough resistant starches. And some of those things do have blood sugar impact. And then a little as a side, even you cook and cool potatoes or rice, over 90% of the starch is something that you're still going to absorb. But that 5-10% that doesn't get absorbed is going to help your gut, right? But if you're someone who's pre-diabetic or diabetic or has metabolic issues, That's not really the best for you. You're still 90% of the starch or carbs in there are going to make metabolic impact, right? That's why I do the biome for me, because those things have minimal blood sugar impact. But going back to that's why I say it's not just one size fits all here, but we got to feed those suckers. You're going to have a different profile depending on the food they eat, which makes sense. Maybe you're going to have like an Alaskan rainforest versus one that in Brazil, right? Versus one that's in Southeast Asia. That's okay. I think that. And it's the microbiome is fascinating. Let me do another aside here about journeys and things I learned in hindsight. My children are adult age now; they're 18 and 20. Unfortunately, both of them have just a slew of allergies. Especially, they have peanut allergies and tree nut allergies. One of them has allergies to different kinds of seafood. Unfortunately, when they were babies, we were obsessed with sanitation and clean and hand sanitizer and all that. And I think now the science shows us that no, they need to be primed. Their immune system needs to have exposure to microorganisms. But there was a trend to just kill all the germs. But we can't live in a septic environment. That's actually not how we evolved. We evolved around microorganisms and hopefully having a healthy relationship with them. When things get out of hand, it can cause infections that require antibiotics and other things. But there was a phase that there were agents in toothpaste or even mouthwash that can just try to obliterate all the bacteria, antimicrobial soaps. I think we need to have a healthy relationship with the bacteria that are on us and inside of us. So keep that in mind. We obviously have to use hand sanitizer as healthcare providers when we go from patient to patient or other means to make sure we don't spread germs. But I want the audience to keep in mind that you're not trying to kill all the bacteria. You want a healthy forest, even not only in your gut, but in your nose, in your armpits, on your skin, in your scalp, in your mouth especially. And there's germs all in those spaces. And that's not, as long as they're the right germs and the right balance, that's going to lead to better overall health across the board. Even for sinus infections, there's a belief that, well, when the microbiome there is disrupted and unhealthy species overpopulate, right? And then you take antibiotics and blast them out. There's ways that you could try to think about living in harmony with the bacteria inside of us and outside of us. So I'm just going to mention that because they discovered people that have dogs, their children develop less allergies. Rolling around, playing in the dirt and doing, versus like keep them all sanitized and clean, their immune system never to kind of learn what's the enemy and what's not the enemy. And that probably ties into, even autoimmune things or severe allergies like the kind that my children have.
Mm-hmm.
But let me go talk about some more things about what the microbiome does and how it helps us. So we talked about what? Emotional, mental, right? But there's also metabolic things. Mm-hmm. Did you know that if you have a healthy microbiome, you're probably going to have better glucose control? You're going to have improved insulin sensitivity and lower diabetes risk. What else? What other things that your immune system? So you're thinking, immune system, how does that help? Healthy bacteria help immune cells work better. They reduce inflammation, which means, inflammation is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's bad when you're inflamed without a reason to be inflamed. And a lot of that is your body's overreaction to what it perceives are threats. The microbiome helps calm those cells down so they can identify what needs to be addressed and what is not the enemy. Did you know about 70% of your immune system lives in your gut? So of course that's going to impact how well you fight infections. We don't think about that. We think when you get colds all the time or you get viral illnesses. Well, your microbiome, the health of it has direct impacts on how well you fight infections. We've already talked about the mood, and think about like Dana mentioned our pediatrician episode. If the audience heard that, one of the biggest pressing issues of the day for our younger people is their emotional health. There's anxiety and there's sadness, there's depression. And again, it's not a silver bullet, but there's no doubt that the microbiome impacts your emotional health, right? And that it kind of blows my mind a little bit. You think, those little buggers inside your gut impact your emotional health. And you look at I would say almost like epidemic of just mood disorder amongst everybody. Everyone's sadder than it used to be, but especially our young people. Now, I'm going to say something that might especially get the attention of people is that, did you know your microbiome helps your gut cells make more GLP-1? Now, when we mention GLP-1 these days, which stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, but that's the hormone that drug companies are trying to mimic now for these new class of weight loss drugs. So you'll hear GLP-1 drugs. You think about Ozempic, Mounjaro. There's a bunch of them now, but that's something your body naturally produces, and it produces that when it has a healthy microbiome producing the right kind of foods it needs. So those cells that produce that can be optimized and do what they need to do. So guess what? When you have your own increased endogenous means produced by your body. GLP-1, there's increased fullness. It improves insulin release and it slows digestion. It does what those drugs do, but it does in a natural harmony with the way your body was intended to. So it also has gut impacts we talked about, like it helps us raise HDL, which is the good kind of cholesterol. So there's actually cardiovascular effects too that benefit the body. So we mentioned in the beginning that this has broad effects across multiple body systems. We just mentioned it helps your heart, helps your digestion, helps your brain and your mood. It helps produce GLP-1s naturally the way your body intended. I want to kind of circle around and just make an impression on our audience how important this is and why it should be addressed. I think everybody needs a healthy microbiome. There's no way to really optimize physical health without it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's incredibly complicated and masterfully designed, but I think we've got to steward it better. We have not stewarded it compared to my parents' generation. I think unknowingly we have hurt ourselves with all the processed food, and it's multifactorial. There's not a magic bullet, like you said, but
yeah. Could you imagine, like you said, Eva, switching out the bread that you eat for just some bean bread on the shelves?
Yeah,
that would have that one bad replacement would have, I think, just really negative impacts, right?
Well, yeah, I had gotten to where I couldn't eat bread. I just didn't eat bread at all because it hurt my stomach so much. It hurt, and anyway, changing this has helped me, along with I had already eaten fresh vegetables and stuff. I still think I can improve, but everybody can probably do things to help their gut,
Yeah, I agree. The foods that we mentioned now, I'm thinking concrete steps. So again, most people, we're not going to be perfect. 1, 2, there's going to be times when we need to take antibiotics, or there's going to be times that where we're going to get a colonoscopy. So I think something that might help the audience is, okay, I took a course of antibiotics for this infection. So what do I do now? I know that I cleared a good part of the forest. How do I get that lush tropical rainforest back with all the diversity in food species? We've mentioned supplements. Maybe we can talk about, gentle restart after you had an antibiotic or a colonoscopy, because, the physical nature of having a bowel prep for a colonoscopy does impact the microbiome negatively. So how do we start? So I would mention gentle restart. We mentioned bone broth. That's a great thing to have. It's easy to digest. It has collagen protein in it. Collagen protein has a different set of what are called amino acids. Those are the building blocks of proteins, right? And a lot of those are beneficial because a lot of your gut is made up of collagen structurally. So are your soft tissues and things like that. So simple foods, avoid extremes, things that are hard to digest. Certainly avoid processed food because that's the last thing you need. Or if you have it, try to eat it minimally, but really try to eat whole foods and start gentle. Think about, okay, the forest has been cleared. I still have some of the forest left, but we got to start feeding and seeding that forest. So feed those bacteria. And how do you do that? We mentioned the soluble fiber, resistant starch, the foods we talked about. Stay hydrated and go slow. Again, when I started taking the supplement, and I didn't have antibiotics or a colonoscopy, but it didn't work right away. And I'll warn the audience, sometimes your gut and bowel habits will change when you first start some of these supplements, especially the prebiotics. You might have distension or gas or change in bowel habits, something like that. That's a transitory thing. Maybe start slow, even the dosing of it. Whatever is on there, if it says take this amount, maybe start with half of that for a few days before you ramp that up. But
I did.
Eat this over that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, David, but I think you're right. When I first started the bread, I did have my gut changed a little bit, and I had some bowel changes. And
Yes.
then I felt, after about a month or two, I felt better than I had ever felt.
Yes,
So,
that's my experience
so
too with the resistant starch.
yeah, so I think that's true. And I think what you're getting at is that this whole thing, feeding the microbiome, it's not symptom relief from our irritable bowel or our reflux or our whatever. It's let's cure it. Let's go to the problem, not the symptom.
Mm-hmm. Because think about that too. Again, I like the metaphor of the forest or the garden. You can't grow that overnight.
That's
You're
right.
not going to throw out seeds
That's
and fertilizer and
perfect.
get apples and flowers the next day.
That's right. That's perfect. Yeah.
Natural systems don't work that way, despite what we
That's right.
want.
Despite what
Yes.
we're that's what we want. That's what the consumer
Mhm.
wants now, but that's not how
Mhm.
it works.
No, and you think about things that are, again, there are very few shortcuts in life. And I'm telling you with this one,
Yep.
that I don't think there are any.
I,
You're
I
going to have to be patient. Yes, patient, persistent. You're growing a garden or you're growing a forest. Those things don't pop up overnight from just a few pills. Okay.
Yep. And I think some of the takeaways for me is eat real food. For me, eat real bread and fermented foods. I think you have some other takeaways.
Yeah, for me, again, practical takeaways. We talked about a lot of stuff, but let's make it practical. Feed those good guys on a regular basis. Ideally every day, maybe even. I think feeding them the food matters more than seeding them with their friend. I think that prebiotics are a little more important than probiotics. I could be wrong about that, but if you look, I told you I've never taken a probiotic, but I take prebiotics every day now. Start low and go slow. This is going to be a transition phase. Okay. You're not going to take Biome or Sun Fiber or whatever other brand and then feel great the next day. In fact, you could even feel worse because you're going to go through a transition phase where you're feeding the right guys, and you might have some of the wrong guys in there. Think toxic waste dump, right? If your gut looks like that, you ain't going from that to a rainforest in one day. Okay, that requires fixing the soil. I mean, when Dana mentioned her family farmed, there's a lot you can learn at the process of how the soil works, right? Well, like I said, your gut is like that. You're not going to go from toxic waste dump to flourishing garden or forest in one day, but you can get there. But be patient. Reduce processed foods. They do not feed your gut microbiome. They have very little utility other than most of them are very pleasurable to eat. And I'm not saying you can't ever have processed foods, but just be mindful they have negative impact and you're going to have to feed those good guys in the gut. And especially after antibiotics or a colonoscopy, be patient. You won't get that microbiome back again the next day. With all this stuff, I always suggest when you're going on this journey to make your microbiome better, work together with your doctor and your healthcare providers to do this in collaboration with them. Again, the good stuff happens in collaboration, whether it's your gut microbiome making the right kind of food because they're fed well to feed the gut cells that make GLP-1 or make the neurotransmitters or help your immune system or help other parts of your body make good cholesterol and all that. So it literally is collaborative. So
I think all of this is great information that's helpful to me and everybody. And if you like this episode and it helps you, share it with your friends. Let's try to get everybody with a healthier microbiome.
Make the world a better place.
That's right. One microbiome at a time.
Exactly.
That's right. Grow that forest and garden, family.
All right, everyone. You've been listening to Health Yeah with Cheyenne, David, Eva, and John, bringing you the medicine, the mayhem, and the laughs every week. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and YouTube for other educational videos and content. And remember, health isn't about perfection. It's about progress. So go out there and live your best Health Yeah life.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your specific situation. All opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The hosts and producers assume no liability for actions taken based on the content of this podcast.